to our DigiFest satellite session hosted by the SFHA today. We are currently doing our webinar on sustainability, home, heat and health. And for those of you who don't know me, I am Stephanie Elliott, the tech lead at the SFHA. Joining us today are two amazing speakers. We have Cassandra Dove, the Policy and Research Lead at SFHA, and John Griffith from Safe House Technology. Before I sort of pass over to our speakers and get going with the presentations, when you do join, can you please make sure that your microphone is muted? During the presentations, if you have any questions, please type it into the chat. We'll keep a wee eye on the questions as they come in, and at an appropriate time, we'll take your questions to the panel. During the Q&A at the end, if you'd like to speak, please use the raise your hand function. It just means that everyone isn't talking over each other and we've got a wee bit of control over the flow of questions that are coming in. Obviously, you can type them into the chat. We hope that you're comfortable with having your video enabled so we can all see one another, but obviously if you don't prefer to have it on, no pressure, feel free to turn your camera off. We will be recording the presentations, but not the Q&A, and everyone who's joined the call today will receive a recording alongside any presentations that are shareable. And it will only be shared amongst attendees. So that's everything from me at the minute. I'll take you into an introduction of the session. So as I've mentioned, we are the DigiFest satellite session for housing. We sit on the DigiFest steering group representing the housing sector. So for those of you who don't know, like I said, today is in collaboration with DigiFest, the Scottish Government's Digital Health and Care Directorate, and we are working with steering group partners, including the SFHA and the European Connected Health Alliance, to deliver this year's DigiFest on the 30th of November. It's a hybrid event, and that is to basically facilitate a Scottish digital health and care ecosystem learning event. So on the run up to the hybrid event on the 30th of November, all the different steering groups have been hosting their own satellite sessions covering the different themes of DigiFest this year. For our session today, it is sustainability, exploring the relationship between home, heat and health. And I'd like to hand you over to our first speaker, Cassandra Dove, who will give you a great presentation from the housing perspective of net zero and sustainability. Take it away, Cassandra. Thank you.
Thanks, Steph, and good morning, everybody. I'll just get my slides up. I think we've gone a bit ahead. Yeah, so as Steph mentioned, I'm Cassandra, so I'm part of the policy team at SFHA. I'd been asked to come along and speak this morning about, I guess, the kind of policy landscape for social housing in Scotland and the changes around how we'll be kind of heating our homes in the future. And then I'll leave the other speakers to kind of go a bit more into the detail of the role of technology in that future. So just quickly, for those that don't know who we are, so SFHA is the member body for housing associations and cooperatives in Scotland. So that covers about 300,000 households. So the presentation today will very much be focused on the social sector, but I hope there's kind of information in there that's applicable to all housing tenures. So I wanted to start really just by reflecting on, I think this is just the last 18 months of kind of key policy changes that we've had, really just to kind of highlight the fast pace at which things have been moving at the moment. So the first thing noted there back in March 2021 was Housing to 2040. So this was basically a kind of 20-year vision for housing in Scotland. So a real commitment, or long-term commitment from Scottish Government, and I think acknowledgement of the role of housing beyond the kind of physical bricks and mortar, that, you know, good housing and homes will support our health, our well-being and life chances. At the same time, we also had the Just Transition Commission who'd published their report, and this was kind of looking at key principles for how we make sure addressing the climate emergency is done in a way that doesn't burden those that are least able to pay. So that's all about kind of principles of fairness. We did also have an election at 2021, which again meant some key changes in that housing was kind of elevated to Cabinet Secretary level. We had a new Cabinet Secretary for net zero, and there was also the partnership between the SNP and the Greens, and we've seen some ministerial positions for members of the Green Party. So we now have Patrick Harvey as a Minister for Zero Carbon Buildings as well, which was a new addition. So yeah, again, kind of changes in terms of the cooperation agreement that came between SNP and the Greens, which has been driving some of the policy decisions as well. In June, there was also Scotland's first climate assembly. So this was kind of based on a citizens' jury model, where it was 100 members of the public that were brought together to, again, make kind of decisions on how we tackle the climate emergency in an effective and fair way. In August, the report I've noted there, the Zero Emissions Social Housing Task Force, also known as ZEST, and this was a piece of work that we were quite involved in. Our chief exec co-chaired that group, and I'll pick up kind of a bit more in detail on that on a later slide. But this was all about, how the social sector gets to net zero. In October, the Scottish Government, October last year, the Scottish Government published its heat and buildings strategy. At this similar time, the UK published their version, which was the heat and building strategy, just to make things nice and confusing. And that was around the time of COP26 last year, which was held here in Glasgow. I'm sure that won't have passed you by, but climate change obviously became a very high profile issue with world leaders gathering in Scotland to discuss the global challenges and solution. We're now a year on that we've seen COP27 just conclude over the weekend, although unfortunately still dominated by arguments about who foots the bill. Tail end of last year, Scottish Government also published its fuel poverty strategy, and that commits to essentially eradicating fuel poverty by 2040. There's also an interim target for 2030, that no more than 15% of households should be in fuel poverty by that interim date. Unfortunately, that's only 8 years away, and we are kind of moving in the other direction at the moment, mainly due to the energy and wider cost of living crisis, which again came to the surface last year, but unfortunately not likely to be going away anytime soon. And yeah, we're kind of barely scratching the surface here, but I just wanted to give a flavour of some of the kind of key policies and strategies which are driving where we are now and where we're headed. And it's true there's, a lot of challenges, but also opportunities. And I think post-COVID, certainly a real recognition of the role of our homes in driving good outcomes for individuals and for society as a whole. So I guess coming back to the net zero element, most of the change that we are seeing has been centred around that ambition to become a net zero country, society and economy by 2045. What does that mean? I know the term net zero is bandied about quite a lot at the moment. Some people use kind of zero carbon as another kind of shorthand term as well, but essentially means that we need to try and balance the amount of greenhouse gas emissions that we produce with those that we can remove from the atmosphere. And given that we're limited in what we can remove, we really need to reduce what we're producing in the first place. Scottish Government has launched a Net Zero Nation campaign. You might have seen some of the kind of TV and billboard ads. But I mean, essentially, our homes are really going to need to be a big part of this, given that heat and buildings accounts for about 20% of Scotland's greenhouse gas emissions. What that means is that almost all homes are going to need to use some form of low or zero emissions heating by 2045. And I'll cover in some of the slides what that means in terms of the technologies. So in terms of where we are now, again, stats here for the social sector, but the social sector is kind of performing quite well in terms of energy efficiency. The majority of homes met the initial energy efficiency milestone, which was the end of December 2020. To get there has taken a lot of investment though, so over 400 million to improve the energy efficiency of social sector homes. And that's mainly been funded through rental income. And this is where the current rent freeze and any proposals around future rent caps could really impact future investment plans. To get to net zero, we have an even greater challenge as the majority of our homes are heated by gas at the moment. And even with the kind of recent price increases, gas remains the cheapest way to heat our homes. I've put the kind of unit rates there based on the October prices that we've seen, with the protections that have been put in place through the energy price guarantee. And then in terms of fuel poverty, so again, despite the relatively good energy performance of social sector homes, the social sector still has the highest rate of fuel poverty. Even pre-COVID, that was sitting at about 37%. But those kind of latest figures are from Scottish Government estimates. And that, again, is even with the protections that we have in place from UK government and the kind of cost of living payments. So yeah, it's quite scary numbers, given that we're trying to get rid of fuel poverty as an issue completely by 2040. And although there's been some direct support available to social housing tenants, I know the SFHA certainly has administered 6 million over the last 3 winters via the Fuel Support Fund to help support tenants through emergency fuel top-ups and that kind of thing. But we know that's really a sticking plaster on what is a long-term issue, given fuel poverty, as I say, was still quite high even before the energy crisis and pandemic. So yeah, long-term issue being that incomes aren't sufficient to meet the basic costs of living and heating our homes. So the uprating of benefits announced last week, certainly a step in the right direction, but yeah, again, there's been some continuation of energy support as well, but fuel poverty is something we really need to tackle on all fronts. In terms of the current targets for the sector, so the next energy milestone, which has been reviewed at the moment, so this is known as EISH, or EISH 2, that we're now on as part of the second milestone. Initially, that was proposed that homes would need to meet Energy Performance Certificate Band B rating by 2032. So given the A is the top rating, what you'd expect in kind of a new build home, bringing homes up to a Band B is going to be really challenging. And we've certainly been campaigning to make sure that the review takes us in the direction that we need to go in terms of meeting the net zero part of this, but also creating good outcomes for tenants. So part of the issue at the moment is that the current target doesn't actually take us to net zero. The way the calculations work, actually, some of the best way of achieving a better score is to put a gas boiler in, so that kind of a bit counterintuitive. I know Scottish Government is looking at changes to energy performance certificates and the kind of metrics as part of that to address some of those anomalies. But I know there's still concerns around the current target that, despite being intended as a way of tackling fuel poverty, it isn't going to do enough to make energy affordable for tenants. So again, the calculations there are from pre-energy crisis, but we certainly did some modelling looking at the current target, what it's going to cost and what impact it's going to have. And yeah, even with those quite conservative estimates, I would say we're looking at something like £7,000 per home. Even then, only 41% of homes would actually meet the target. And yes, it would help reduce fuel poverty, but still, not to the extent that we would like to see to meet the fuel poverty targets. So in terms of where we're going, so you can see just some of the milestones that are upcoming. So the review of the energy efficiency standard is now underway. So hopefully that will address some of the concerns that I've just mentioned. We do have the National Public Energy Agency, which has just been launched, and the aim of that is to help, I guess, kind of coordinate some of the upgrades that are going to be needed to our homes in all sectors, not just social. We have a new housing standard coming as well, and that'll be introduced from 2025. And then in terms of the targets for our heating system, so the ambition is to target off-gas homes first, so those that are already using things like oil and LPG that can be quite expensive, and then for on-gas homes, the aim is to have at least 1 million of these converted to zero emissions heating by 2030. And then sandwiched in between that, there is requirements for new build homes as well, that those that we're building now will need to include zero emissions direct heating. So that's the new build heat standard for 2024 that's coming in. But for the social sector, the requirement is that anything built from 2026 will need to meet that too. So what do we need to do to our homes then? So firstly, we need to reduce how much energy that we're using in the first place. So a fabric first approach, which may mean things like additional insulation, draft proofing, renewing windows and doors, things like that. But also being smarter in how we use our energy. So thermostatic and smart controls. Again, I know we'll hear more about the role of technology later in the session. And then moving to different types of heating. So low zero emissions heat, various different types, but essentially what we're looking to do is either capture heat from another place that we can use in our home. So that's things like air source heat pumps, ground source or water source heat pumps, if you happen to live in an area or have the land to be able to do that. Or you're using some form of electric heat, which the electricity comes from renewable generation. So that might be things like electric storage heaters or kind of electric boilers. The other option, which is kind of uses a combination of those things depending on the source, are heat networks. So this would be a shift to what we have in other kind of Scandinavian countries. Copenhagen in particular is quite a good example, but where rather than having individual boilers in our home, so you have one heat source which distributes heat to multiple properties. And there are already about 1,000 heat networks in Scotland, but that's going to be, again, another option going forward, particularly where we have the density of enough properties to make that viable. So what does this mean for tenants? So, I mean, in terms of things I've talked about there, there's likely going to have to be fabric upgrades. That might even be needed as a precursor for some of these heating systems to make sure that they can work efficiently and affordably. Infrastructure upgrades. So if we're all going to be switching to electric forms of heat, as well as electric forms of transport, then the electricity grid is going to need to be able to cope with that. So that's going to require upgrades too. We of course have lots of mixed tenure blocks in Scotland, so that becomes tricky in terms of we need the agreement and the investment from everyone involved in a block if you're going to do something like a communal heating system or fabric upgrades to entire block. And then internally, it's going to mean some changes as well. A lot of these systems, so heat pumps and things, do require bigger heat emitters, so you're going to need larger radiators. Just because of the way that they work, they operate best when they're at a low temperature. But to heat the room to the same way, you need a bigger radiator, essentially, for that to work efficiently. And where previously we've heated our hot water as part of a combi gas boiler, typically, with some of these other systems, what you might need is a separate water tank and water heating. So yeah, obviously kind of pros and cons to all the different options, but ultimately there's lots of cool benefits to this, that if we're reducing our greenhouse gas emissions, that will in turn help address the climate emergency. Also mean less reliance on fossil fuels. We've seen from the last few months or year even just how volatile the wholesale gas market can be. And there's obviously wider societal benefits if we can produce fewer greenhouse gas emissions, so in terms of cleaner air. But also if we implement this correctly, with the appropriate funding and supporting policies around energy pricing, then this could obviously be a part of our strategy to reduce fuel poverty, and improve comfort and the living conditions, which in turn, again, could help us improve health and well-being. And I know we'll hear more about that aspect from other speakers today. So in terms of what the sector needs to make this happen, and this is where I wanted to link back to the ZEST report that I mentioned earlier. I'll not go into the detail of the recommendations, but I guess just the general themes that were in that report. So key one about, supporting a just transition. So this really means, again, embedding that principle of fairness and making sure that social tenants don't bear the brunt of the risk. And by risk, I mean both the kind of technical risk of new technologies, but also the financial risk, that, in going first with some of these technologies, they're not faced with the kind of higher upfront costs. And as I say, the transition point that we are in terms of gas and electricity prices, and that may change in the future, but again, if the social sector is expected to go first, that's not particularly fair that they faced higher costs in the short term. I think there's also something in there around, low-income households do tend to be those who might already be rationing their energy and underheating their homes. So there's a balance in that, yeah, we're trying to reduce energy use and emissions, but there might be some cases where actually a just outcome might be that household using more energy and heating their home to, a healthy and safe standard. And then on structuring and design of capital investments, so that was really about making sure the funding mechanisms that we have are in line with the needs of the sector. So historically, we've had kind of short-term pots of funding, which, you know, social landlords are, you know, kind of bidding against each other for. So I guess ZEST was kind of focused about a kind of longer term approach to that and making sure that we have a strategic allocation of funds based on need. We do now have the 200 million social housing net zero heat fund, but still a very challenging environment for our members at the moment, given the competing priorities in terms of their investments and the pressure to keep rents affordable. And I know separately work is progressing as part of the Green Heat Finance Task Force to look at innovative funding and finance models for the sector. And then I'll not go through the others just in the interest of time, but happy to pick any of this up later in the questions. But wanted to end on that last point. There was discussions as part of ZEST about, you know, understanding the impact of what we're doing and the changes that we're making to our homes. So monitoring and evaluation to understand how well certain measures or heating systems are performing. So both in terms of technical terms, but also how they impact the occupants in terms of their satisfaction and well-being. So, you know, with a lot of these changes, yes, of course, there's the potential for direct financial returns if they're saving people money on their bills. But as I mentioned earlier, there's also the kind of indirect benefits of healthier homes in general. So hopefully that's a nice segue into the healthier homes presentation from Steph. So I will hand over to you. I'll stop sharing my screen just now.
Thanks very much for that, Cassandra. I think it really does help sort of contextualise the work of Healthier Homes and kind of set the scene a little bit for the presentations that you're about to see. So let's not dilly-dally. I'm going to share my screen. Sorry, a wee sec. Let me get this right. There we go. Give me a wee nod if you can see that all right. Perfect, thank you. There we are. All right, thank you everyone, and thank you again, Cassandra. That was a lovely segue into the Healthier Homes initiative, which is an initiative, put your teeth in, Steph, initiative from the Technology Enabled Care and Housing Programme. So the Scottish Government's Technology Enabled Care Programme, the housing work stream is hosted by the SFHA, and the main aim of the Tech 2, second phase of the Technology Enabled Care and Housing Programme, is to upscale housing's contribution to the digital health and care strategy. So the Healthier Homes Initiative is one project of the Tech programme that was designed to collaborate with housing associations and to help support them as they transition towards digital services, or they look to embed brand new digital services that benefit and support tenants, but also their business and their assets. Today's presentation will cover what the Healthier Homes Initiative is, sort of where we are now in the timeline, why we need this initiative, and then although we've got 5 fantastic pathfinders, to save a bit of time today, we've focused on one pathfinder who's just released a lovely big article in the news, so there's some great learnings and stories from that already. So what is the Healthier Homes Initiative? The Healthier Homes Initiative is a 4-phase project to understand, test and evaluate if digital technology, customer engagement and partnership working has a positive impact on wellbeing through the provision of warmer homes. The project aim is to inform future strategic planning across the housing sector, and the Healthier Homes Initiative was designed to ensure collaboration with tenants and stakeholders at all stages. So like I said, we're part of the Tech and Housing Programme. We wanted to work with social landlords who are interested in collaborating with us around digital, IoT, but also look into how they can embed services that better support their tenants' health and wellbeing. Oh, where did we go? Sorry, hold on. Post my notes. Sorry, bear with me, guys. There we go. Next slide. So where are we now? Phase one of the Healthier Homes Initiative took place at the start of 2021 or late 2020. And phase one was understanding the landscape. So we wanted to discover which housing providers had interest in working with IoT to support service delivery. Surveys were sent out to all registered social landlords and local authorities, and invites to the Healthier Homes information events were sent out nationwide. Service design training was then made available to all who engaged with the tech initiative. And then the Pathfinder Collaborative was established to promote the understandings of synergies between assets and wellbeing through customer engagement sessions, case studies, and information and insight gathering. Each used the Scottish approach to service design to progress their own projects, and the decision was made early on to focus on environmental sensors and the indoor environment. So just to classify what an environmental sensor is, an environmental sensor is an unobtrusive and secure environmental sensor placed throughout the home to monitor temperature, humidity, carbon dioxide, providing actionable insights into conditions such as mould risk, energy efficiency, ventilation, excess cold and heat, as well as the quality of the indoor air. Phase two was around understanding customer attitudes and appetites. So we commissioned TPAS to engage with tenants from Pathfinder organisations. User research was conducted, and it did identify some clear skills and knowledge gaps amongst tenants. A small number of participants did agree that they felt skilled and knowledgeable and familiar with technology and its benefits. However, most participants had minimum knowledge and skills around tech, with the majority keen to learn more as they saw the benefits to their health and well-being. Participants also had very varying levels of comfort in actually engaging with technology, any form of technology. Phase three, which is where we are currently, this phase involves Pathfinders and their customers trialling the equipment, measuring impact on well-being, asset management and business practices. And using the insights gained from phase one and two, as well as utilising approved co-design and improvement methodologies, the Pathfinders will work with small cohorts of householders to perform a test of change that lasts 12 months. The rollout of the environmental sensors is underway, and the live data is starting to feed back. Finally, in phase four, taking these sensors and the data they produce, Pathfinders can ensure that the indoor environments remain optimal and within the recommended guidelines for temperature and humidity, thus reducing tenants' exposure to health risks relating to cold and damp. And where the indoor environment falls below standard, mechanisms will be in place to alert the housing provider to allow them to take action far earlier to protect the asset and the environment of their tenant. And then finally, in phase four, we are looking to capture the learning. So capturing the learning from the trials and a final report that evaluates the impact of the Healthier Homes Initiative, including providing recommendations for the housing sector and its leaders as they look to embed technology within their practices and services. Our Pathfinders. Pathfinders, especially one that explores untraversed regions to mark out a new route. As you can see, we have 5 Pathfinders currently. 3 of our Pathfinders have begun rolling out technology, and 2 have still to start that rollout. The Pathfinder Collaborative was established to share findings, including how to overcome project blockers. If you remember me saying at the start, using the Scottish approach to service design means that each project the Pathfinders are running is very bespoke to their organisation and the needs of their clients and their staff and their infrastructure. So it has meant that the projects are accelerating at different paces, with viewing healthier homes through slightly different lenses, but effectively all applying a similar approach, using environmental sensors to ensure adequate provision of safe and warm homes. As part of the Pathfinder Collaborative, they all undertook service design training, and they initially identified the need for a sort of repository of various informations and sources. So why do we need this initiative? Based on everything Cassandra was saying at the start of our presentation today, the Healthier Homes Initiative is very timely. There's loads of transition, there's loads of retrofit. Environmental sensors really are a very good way of providing data, impartial data that reflects the quality, the performance of the asset that you have. So the World Health Organization has highlighted that poor housing conditions are one of the main mechanisms through which social and environmental inequality translates into health inequality, which further affects quality of life and well-being. The right to an adequate standard of housing is therefore inextricably linked to the right of the highest attainable standard of health. So in Scotland, we have an ageing population that's living longer. This means that the demands on health and social care will increase well into the future. We want to start thinking about different housing options and promoting greater adaptability across housing stock to allow us to live independently at home for longer, thus reducing the demand upstream on health and social care services. The number of households is growing and more people are living alone. In fact, the number of households in Scotland projected to increase to being one-person households will be the most common type of household that we have. So in the future, we'll have more households than ever before, but the majority of those households will be made up of single occupants. This means we need to think strategically about how we design and build new homes and where and how we can make the best use of our existing stock. So things that go into the correlation between home and health includes affordability. So living in poverty is known to be damaging for health and is one of the main causes for health inequality. Housing affordability is a key driver of poverty and inequality in Scotland. Increasing the supply of affordable housing is key to addressing housing need and tackling all poverty, specifically child poverty. Low-income households are more likely to be impacted by fuel poverty, and living in cold, damp homes is associated with higher mortality rates and cold-related ill health. Accessibility. People with disabilities face significant unmet housing needs, with over 31,000 disabled people being projected to experience an unmet housing need by 2040. In terms of housing quality and condition, there is a range of ways in which housing can be modified to improve health outcomes for households, including improved energy efficiency, removing hazards in the home, and increasing provision for affordable housing. In Scotland in 2019, 2% of households lived in overcrowded accommodation, which is associated with the spread of anxiety and also respiratory illnesses. The cost of poor housing to the NHS varies, but the risk to health and provision of treatment could likely be avoidable if improvements were made. And let's look at the links between housing and health. So if you look at this grid, what you'll see is the housing conditions, the risk factor and the correlating health conditions. So through thermal inefficiency, poor weatherproofing, unaffordable heating, this can lead to risk factors such as damp, mould, cold, fuel poverty, poor ventilation, dust mites, infestation, that kind of thing. This can then have outcomes for tenants, including cardiorespiratory disease, digestive health issues, allergies, skin conditions, headaches, migraines, stress, anxiety, depression, and mental ill health. As we are all fully aware, safe and warm homes and good neighbourhoods improve physical and mental health, improve physical and mental health and well-being and build strong communities. The quality of a home and how affordable it is both important in creating a sense of home and having a safe, warm place to live. Has very clear health benefits, particularly for young children, elderly people, and for people with physical and mental health conditions. Putting a focus on place at the heart of our work and making sure homes add to and create great places will help to improve social cohesion, enable and contribute to community wealth building and unlock social capital across Scotland. In terms of the NHS recommendations, we would be looking to have Excuse me, my notes are muddled here. So NHS recommended temperatures, if you're over 65 and have a health condition, i.e. a heart condition or lung disease, it's recommended to heat your home between 18 and 21 degrees Celsius. But it is also important to note that your house can actually be too warm, and temperatures greater than 24 degrees can lead to things like headaches and dehydration. If you are under 65 and you have no known health conditions and you're fairly healthy and active, your home can be below 18 degrees and it wouldn't cause you much bother as long as you feel comfortable. Cold homes really do impact health quite negatively. Cold homes increase damp and mould, correlate with respiratory issues such as asthma, but also it can exacerbate COPD and various other lung conditions or cardiorespiratory disorders. Cold homes actually increase the risk of falling because temperatures below 12 degrees actually drop blood pressure, drop heart rate, increase the likelihood of postural hypertension. So when you stand up, your blood pressure drops and it can increase your risk of falling. We can also have increased risks of hypothermia, the winter blues, and research actually shows that where homes are heated within the recommended guidelines, it can actually reduce the winter blues by up to 50%. Additionally, risks associated with cold homes include increased rates of general sickness and increased rates of absence from school. I should note that the slides that you can see on your screen at the minute actually formed part of our tenant engagement sessions that we held. And as part of those sessions, we held information and education sessions on how you heat your home, how confident are you in using technology to heat your home, and were you aware of the recommendations and did you feel like your home was heated to those levels on average. Groups that are at greater risk from cold and damp include older people, people with underlying health conditions, young people, babies under the age of 5, pregnant women. So all risk groups that would be high risk for health and social care providers are also high risk for housing providers. And actually a lot of the time, a lot of work and intervention that happens with health and social care can really be undone if tenants or patients are coming back to suboptimal living environments. Our Pathfinder Spotlight. I don't know if anyone caught this article. It was in the Facility Management Journal. One of our Pathfinders, Stirling, is set to deploy the largest IoT sensor rollout in Scotland. So Stirling Council, in partnership with home safety tech firm ACO, other providers are available, is embarking on the first rollout of a multi-technology and sensor-connected home solution across an entire social housing portfolio stock, with 50,000 IoT devices being installed over the next 8 years. 8 to 10 years, sorry. In homes managed by the council's housing service. Environmental sensors will be installed in tenants' homes to collect information which will dramatically improve the health, safety and well-being of residents. Collected data will include temperature, humidity, carbon dioxide gas levels, alongside smoke detection sensors. The sensors will alert the council in real time and provide early warnings of damp, mould, ventilation and any other potential issues, while helping the tenant to understand energy consumption and helping them explain how to use technology to heat their home. I'm very pleased to say that this is a very good news story relating to housing in Scotland. You would have seen across perhaps news and articles over the last few weeks tragic stories about the death of a young boy due to respiratory illness affecting mould. So this is a great showcase for preventative measures and how we can make sure that the indoor quality that our tenants experience and the quality of the assets we manage really reduce the risks of exposing anyone to the risk of respiratory illness, poor ill health, or tragically death. So we feel like the Healthier Homes Initiative that supports these pathfinders to do this amazing work really supports residents to take ownership of the home that they live in and helps them identify where attitudes and behaviours and how they live in their home are leading to condensation and these kind of things, but the data will also help the housing provider establish where their responsibility lies. And it takes out any bias, it takes out any guesswork, and it really means that the relationship between housing provider and tenant is as smooth as possibly can be. So residents will be invited to use this free app to gain a view of their home's health and the quality of their indoor environment. The app also provides advice and guidance on how to improve living conditions. So like I just mentioned, there may be an alert saying we have detected moisture in the air. It will then prompt the individual to take action. So it could be open a window, don't dry your radiators, don't dry your towels over radiators, that kind of thing. Or it could be an alert straight to the housing provider to send someone out for a maintenance check, that kind of thing. So like I said, it provides guidance on how to improve living conditions and live a healthier and safer life whilst reducing carbon footprints and saving money on energy bills. In a time of fuel poverty, connected devices, more often seen in private dwellings, are emerging as a powerful tool, ensuring social homes are healthy to live in and used in an energy efficient manner. Homes will also benefit from a significant fire safety upgrade and will be equipped with connected smoke, heat and carbon monoxide alarms. Having the ability to identify the least thermally efficient homes means that Stirling Council, as a landlord, can take intelligence-led decisions to target capital investment programmes at those properties. The Fuel Poverty Act in Scotland. Sorry, I've got a golden retriever trying to steal the limelight. The Fuel Poverty Act also seeks to protect residents of all households, but particularly those in rural, Highland and Island communities, and from facing fuel poverty. Stirling Council has around 20% of its portfolio in rural areas. I hope you can agree this sounds like a fantastic piece of work, and I feel like the learning and the data that's going to be shared off the back of this project is really going to help us inform some direction for the housing sector in the future. So finally, from a tenant's perspective, featured in the article that we just quoted, tenant Robert Kearney was interviewed and he gave a great quote, a great couple of paragraphs. I was initially sceptical about what the sensors and technology being put into my home would bring in terms of financial and health benefits. However, by recording moisture in the air, I can be alerted to the risk of damp and mould rather than having to keep an eye out for these things. My landlord also knows better when it's time to come and do repairs or maintenance work on the property. This new IoT technology for homes like mine is fantastic because it helps me feel safer, live in a healthier environment and reduce costs. I'm more aware of how my home is behaving and alerted to ways I can save money by using this free cutting-edge connected home kit. For example, wasting money trying to heat a home that has gaps in the doors and windows letting heat out, or an inefficient boiler and room heaters that need bleeding. Everyone is concerned about the rising cost of energy, but thanks to these improvements, it's not a question of eat or heat for me now. Great quote from Robert, and I think it kind of highlights a lot of the conversations that we were having during our tenant engagement. There was a healthy level of scepticism about sort of what data would be taken, how the data would be used, and what it basically meant in terms of the rights of the tenant. So to finish us off today, for the last minute or so, I just wanted to briefly cover the data protection impact assessment. So with the technology that's being rolled out across Scotland at the minute through the Healthier Homes Initiative, data protection keeps coming up. It's a common theme. So using the insights gathered from our Pathfinders and the materials that they were happy to share, these are a couple of the sort of highlights and things that I feel in terms of getting the ball rolling with data protection is quite crucial. So a DPIA is a process for ensuring, DPIA is a data protection impact assessment, and it is a process for ensuring organisations consider the risks to the individual and ensure proper handling of personal data are fully considered. And GDPR actually requires that a DPIA or DPIAs are created prior to any processing of an individual's data. DPIA is a living document that should span the entire length of a project or a service. And the people best placed to carry out this DPIA would be those who are designing and developing the project. So a couple of key steps that were highlighted that may be of use to you guys as you move forward into this area would be step 1, identifying the need for a DPIA. A summary of the conclusions reached at section Step 2, describing information flows. So you should be able to explain how information is coming into your system, what type of information is coming into your system, who's handling it, for what purposes, and where is it going. Step 3, consultation. So consulting internally with your organisation, but then also taking that wider view and externally consulting, perhaps with the Information Commissioning Office and that kind of thing. I know one of our Pathfinders found the ICO very useful and very, very helpful in helping them navigate this process. So in terms of internal, you're talking project teams, stakeholders, staff, users of the service, which includes staff, data protection teams, data protection officers, and any legal teams or legal services that you may have within your organisation. External consultation may include members of the public, trade unions, professional bodies, the police, data processors, the Information Commissioner's Office, that kind of thing. Step 4 is to assess the necessity and proportionality. So it should be considered whether plans to help you achieve your purposes and if there is another reasonable way to achieve the same result without capturing this personal data. Step 5 is to identify and assess risks. So once you understand how the personal data is intended to be used, you do have to consider the risks associated with how that personal data is handled. To assess whether a risk is high, you need to consider both the likelihood and the severity of the possible harm. Harm does not have to be inevitable to qualify as a risk or even as a high risk. However, it must be more than remote. It has to be seriously considered. Risks may include privacy risks, compliance risks, risks related to the organisation, such as fines for non-compliance, legislation conflicts, and loss of business. Identifying mitigating factors. So once we do identify the risks and things that could potentially harm the project or people's personal data, action should be taken to help mitigate those risks. So it could be that handling that particular type of data is classed as high risk. So it may be that you take the decision that those pieces of information shouldn't be collected as long as it doesn't impact the main reason for your project. So offering individuals the chance to opt out. So what we've seen through our Pathfinder work is a lot of user agreements, a lot of really clear, concise communications explaining the processes, how the technology is going to work, and then also training packages for the tenants to help them navigate how to use the technology and who they can reach out to for support and for help if anything becomes a problem or if anything they don't understand. So all in all, that's sort of rounding off the Healthier Homes presentation. I hope you found that useful, and I'd be happy to follow up with anyone offline on an individual basis to help you get started on a project similar to this, or if you would be happy to contribute to any learnings for a final report, it would be much appreciated. Thank you very much for your time. Let me just stop sharing. Lovely. I'm back in the room. Can you see me all right there, guys, everyone?
Yes,
Fab.
we can.
Thank you, Karen. So I hope that was informative and it demonstrated the use of environmental sensors within the home environment to improve the life of the tenant, but to also improve the quality and the framework of asset management practices. It should be noted that environmental sensors can be used for a variety of inventive reasons. I'm going to hand over to John. John is the CTO of a smart technology company called SafeHouse Technology, and he's going to be giving us a presentation on smart monitoring and the approach that SafeHouse Technologies have taken to monitor the quality of someone's environment. All right, to hand over to yourself, John.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much for the. It was an excellent presentation, and thanks very much for that. Just going to share my screen. There we go. And if you can just tell me if you can see. Can you see my presentation?
Yeah, John.
You can. Okay, great. You can see that okay. Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for inviting me to present today. My name's John Griffiths. We were one of the winners of the 5G Scotland 5G Centre awards for looking at IoT for health and social care, which we completed on the 5th of October. I'm going to put a few slides in regarding that, but today I'm going to take you through the history of the company and exactly how you turn what Stephanie very eloquently said about the benefits to your clients into practical reality using IoT. So my name's John Griffiths. I actually started and founded SafeHouse Technology in October 2013, so I've been around about 9 years. It was as a result of working as technology specialist for the Welsh Government from 1998 to 2011. During that period, I was looking particularly at smart technologies such as smart metering. And in 2003, my mother contracted small vessel dementia, which I then became her primary carer. So when I left the Welsh Government, I was actually the assisted living specialist for Europe, for Wales, and I decided to set up SafeHouse because nowhere else was actually doing the job that I thought was necessary. When looking after for somebody who has dementia, you pick up a lot of things in the house, and I'm going to go through most of those in my presentation that SafeHouse addresses. SafeHouse itself was voted, or was a finalist, should I say, in Smart City Expo in 2015. And as a result of that, I was taken into the Department of International Trade to be their IoT and smart city specialist for China, Malaysia, Thailand, and Singapore, and finally the world. And I left there in 2018 to concentrate on SafeHouse technology. And I'm going to take you through that journey. I don't know what happened there. Sorry about that. So what is SafeHouse? It was originally designed as a home hub, which was completely open, allowing people to put sensors connected to it and to integrate IoT into health and well-being, and basically the ability to pick up data in an efficient form using proven technology and then put it centrally so that it can be monitored in a very simple environment by those people who would most benefit from that data. And those people were health boards, councils, housing associations. And as such, SafeHouse actually combines various sensors, basically Bluetooth, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. We also have other Internet of Things sensors which are connected via LoRa, or you may know it better as IoT Scotland network. And essentially, we take all the risk out of this and make sure that you actually have the technology that comes out the box and just works and gives you the results you're interested in. So it is a complete end-to-end IoT solution. It involves sensors, SafeHouse sensor. You can see there's a SafeHouse hub there. But more importantly, any internet protocol enabled sensor can be connected up to the software as a service we call Viper. And this manages things such as light sensors, VOC, volatile organic carbon, temperature, electricity, whether it's on CO2 and fire alarms, just for mention a few. And then enables it to be put onto an app which alerts people when they go through certain threshold criteria, which makes for great customer involvement. They also have access to the Viper dashboard, which indicates when the home is healthy in a sort of speedometer type way, and also, as I said, can alert using email as well if you're not that, don't want to be told all the time, but you just want to occasionally look at it. So that's the Safe House. It's an end-to-end digital solution. It sits in the home, and out of the box, it sits and it makes sure the electricity is on, hence it's a mains powered unit. It picks up temperature and humidity every 15 minutes. It listens for smoke alarms, so you can have those basically daisy chain smoke alarms, which are battery powered, which then connect to Safe House and then come back to the software as a service. And the software as a service normalizes all this data so that temperature is always in Celsius, doesn't matter what sensor you've got. CO2 is always in parts per million. Humidity is in a percentage, and essentially filters that on an individual property basis to a mobile phone app, which is free to download, and enables you to actually have these limits, thresholds alerted to change your lifestyle. If you want to actually look at the history, you can log on to the Viper dashboard, and then that'll show you up to the last 60 days of what's happened in the 15-minute intervals on any of the sensor readings. And we find this is really good for customer engagement when they see people maybe spending longer in the shower than you could do if you've got an electric shower, and things of that sort, or possibly actually having very high CO2 concentrations in the bedroom, which tends to make you drowsy and potentially more likely to fall. So Safe House itself is a completely unintrusive unit. It sits in the house and allows battery units, which have a lifespan of about 18 months, to sit in any room in the house. So you're not just covering one room, you can cover as many rooms as you wish. And this has great advantage with older people who are single, in that you can find out their activity in the house itself, and more importantly, maybe advise that somebody has got some issues if they're not actually moving, they're not very mobile, the temperature's low, and then all of a sudden you can find that people are actually depressed but don't show it, and as such maybe in fuel poverty and are too proud to explain that to people. So it's a really handy thing, handy unit to actually have, and as I said, it can be expanded into up to 8 rooms, where you can pick up temperature, humidity, CO2, light, movement, and sound. Very, very volatile organic compounds as well. So a very handy set of data which comes back to a data source in Viper. So how can smart technology keep people safe in their own homes longer? How can they keep people more sustainable in their own homes? Well, it's pretty easy, because you get invisible hazards, and some of the invisible hazards are obvious, but we don't really take them into consideration because they're not measured. So CO2 is a very obvious invisible hazard. In many cases, if you have over 2,000 parts per million of CO2, which is not uncommon in the bedroom, you can be waking up in the morning with the equivalent of 2 pints of lager. That's how it affects your mental ability. So over 2,000 parts per million, you'd be down to 40% of your actual mental capacity. Obviously waking up in the morning, then forgetting to switch the light on, and then potentially falling over and breaking a hip, or worse, going unconscious. That's always really a big issue. And what we do is we pick up those invisible hazards and address those. So just by better ventilation in the bedroom, you can improve people's ability to live happier, and also to de-risk them. So we also supply basically a complete Safe House system, which allows each room to be monitored, and that's really handy when you're trying to work out if somebody's safe and well, especially in rural areas where there may not be next door neighbours. and you would get alerts, for example, if somebody hasn't got out of bed for the day, or indeed if they haven't left the lounge for maybe 10 hours or 12 hours. This can be combined to pick up falls, which I'll come on to in a moment. So basically, the movement and the ability of the house to operate efficiently in each room, yet only one connection back to the SafeHouse Viper, means that you can actually look and have a good idea of what's happening in the house completely subliminally with the permission of the owner on the consent form. And you can then have a really good insight into what's happening at home, and if somebody's changed from their normal environment, which is normally a sign of some type of reduction in normality of their actions. So as I said, we use SafeHouse. SafeHouse is one of our products, but we also have other products which are commercially available, which can connect directly into the Viper platform and give the same results. So we're not a one product, you have to buy it as company at all. Indeed, you can buy the software as a service and have as many many sensors connected onto the system as you wish. So you can actually tailor what you're going to put out through to your clients. We also have GPS locators, which are kind of handy. They're effectively a button which works in the IoT Scotland area, which means that people don't have to stay in their own house to have an alarm button. And what happens is that it gives the longitude and latitude of the person who's pressed the button, and usually somebody will then phone their mobile phone to see if they're okay. It's more of an assistance button, so if you get confused or you're out or lost, then you can actually phone somebody and they know where you are and they can help you. But in over 3 years, we worked with Glasgow Social Services, and I see Michael Gillespie's on the invite list. And we looked really at how to make a satisfactory fall detector in the home, which sat on top of all the SafeHouse services, to then make sure that somebody can actually be safe in their own home. And I'll be going through this in a minute. Stephanie asked me to put some case studies together. So I thought I'd pick up 5, which we've experienced from putting 2,000 sensors, SafeHouse sensors into Liverpool. And the obvious one, which has been in the news an awful lot, is damp and mold. And obviously temperature and humidity, there's well documented thresholds for those that cause those particular environment. But the main thing associated with that is healthier lives. Nobody wants to live in an environment of that sort. And indeed, the intangible benefits of, reduced compensation payments, which are significant usually. And we found that in Liverpool. Fuel poverty is really just temperature. And we all know that there's a certain amount of social responsibility, and I think Stephanie's really covered that. But there's an awful lot of impact relating to the NHS. And one of the case studies we had down in Liverpool was basically this guy was absolutely fine as far as social services were concerned. We put a SafeHouse in there, and the carers were going in and they were saying, yep, he's great, there's no problem at all, absolutely fine, the place is warm, etc., etc. When SafeHouse went in, it immediately alerted that this guy was actually only switching the heating on 1 hour before the carer turned off, and then switched it off immediately afterwards, and wasn't leaving the property, and was in extreme denial of the bills and various other things, and we were able to assist there. Really satisfying, that actually. With regards to fire alarms, SafeHouse has a patent which actually allows it to listen to the fire alarms itself. So there's the ability to actually report on the fire alarms and check they've actually had the batteries tested, etc. Obviously, it's got a safety and security implication, but more importantly, means the cost of actually retrofitting these are significantly less than wired alarms, and also means that you can have a SafeHouse, say, in the kitchen, and if the temperature goes up, then that'll go off. Obviously, it would realise that it was above normal, above its threshold. But also, if the smoke alarms go off, these can be daisy chains throughout the property, very economically now, and be battery powered ones, and still comply to the social care regulations. Power on and off failures, something most people don't really consider as keeping people safe in their own homes, but it's a really important one. In Liverpool, we had a situation where a woman was basically living on her own, and for no apparent reason, the safe house unit was going off at 10:30 at night and then going on at 8 o'clock in the morning. And there was no sense or reason to this. So product specialists thought it was actually a faulty unit. I, having had experience with dementia, said, no, I don't think that's it. We got a memory team in, and the memory team turned up and said, hi, Mary, how are you? She said, fine. I said, what's the date today? And they said, 14th of February. And said, what year? And she said, 1968. And she had actually regressed, as quite often happens, to the time of saving by pulling the units out and then plugging them back in the day to save money. And you'd be glad to hear Mary still does that. And she has been treated with Aracet, and I believe she's still happily living at home, unplugging and plugging the units, but she's still at home. Otherwise, that probably would have gone unnoticed, and the result would have been somewhat more catastrophic by going into social care. I put in temperature because weather is really quite important, and when a safe house unit goes in, we pick up the external humidity, air pressure and temperature using APIs from the local weather service, and as such we know what the differential between the inside and the outside in temperature and humidity automatically from the location. And we keep the location, every unit is given the longitude and latitude, so it's very easy to organise the data into areas where there might be significant issues. So that's really handy, because if you can't compare inside and outside temperature, it's a bit tricky really to work from there. And this also works, we've been doing a lot of work down in Wales on a similar scheme for carbon reduction. And we're finding that that really does help, because it gives you the carbon baseline that you need to then build any intervention on and get a sensible impact assessment. So what happened is that we decided to build care of Glasgow Social Services, and specifically 2 years of work using the Can Do Challenge. We built Safe House AI, which looks a bit like this and is connected to the app and LoRa and our Viper system, and looks a bit more palatable. But the main reason for doing it was to actually pick up on falls. And anybody can pick up on a fall if you've got a wearable, right? But is it, have you really fallen, or have you thrown something on the floor? And we were given the challenge of picking up that somebody had fallen without using a wearable, without using broadband, and without using cameras. And the results were pretty impressive, even if I say so myself. On the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see an infrared image. On the center screen, that's one which is everything's taken out, which is above 40 degrees and below 36. And on the right, we use our AI software to actually identify a fall. But anybody can identify one fall. What you have to do is be able to identify a large number of different falls. And we were fortunate enough to have this tested independently, and it was more than 95% accurate with very few false alarms at all. And this is now being turned into an industrial product, which we are just in the processing of being able to sell and install. So we went for the 5G challenge. We won it. And they said, well, what would 5G do for you if you already know that you're actually somebody has fallen? You don't really need 5G. And I said, well, actually, maybe we do need 5G. And what you've got here is a voice over IP, a digital link from a mobile app. And what it does is it actually, as soon as somebody's fallen, it opens up a voice communication with that person directly. But people don't always tell the truth. So what then happens is you have to sort of quantify whether somebody has actually fallen, or how bad it was, or if they say they're okay, are they really okay? So we use the 5G to link to the video, which is actually on the SafeHouse AI. And this, if you can imagine, somebody's fallen, you're now speaking to them, they're saying, no, no, I'm absolutely fine. Nothing happened really. It was one of those things that just, sometimes I'm just clumsy. Now the question is, do you send somebody to see that person now, or would you have probably not sent someone because they told you they were fine and okay? And I know what I'd do anyway. The market for digital switchover is absolutely huge, and we provide SafeHouse as one of the more economical turnkey digital systems. And traditionally, we find most of the things that you really need to know: temperature, humidity, if the electricity's on. If somebody doesn't want to be monitored, they may unplug the device. Fine, you can address that and take it out. And also if the smoke alarms are working. But on top of that, it has the standard panic buttons for alerts, and also allows other sensors to pick up things such as CO2 and VOC to be connected, all very inobtrusively and really very simple to move, to install and work from. So next steps for the digital switchover, we're really looking for demonstration proof of concept, which we can work with housing associations and social landlords. Really, we think that there's a huge market which can be so beneficial, and has been shown both in Liverpool and the standards of social housing stock. And it's not really, that's something that we would like to address, and to make sure that people who live in these environments live in a safe environment. Please contact us. From a technology point of view, we can help you. We know what we're doing in this market. We've been around a long time, and we'd love to hear from you. Okay, thank you.
That was fantastic, John. The case studies, I think, speak for themselves. I know from the stuff that you and I had chatted about, like the reduction in GP visits and things like that, was quite staggering. There's so much potential in using environmental sensors and technology to, like you say, keep people living safely and independently at home. So what other key findings from your case studies did you find?
Yeah, the most, first of all, we were audited by the Department of Culture, Media and Sport without us knowing it, down in Liverpool, which was interesting, who came back with a report. I can share with you the report actually. And just out of picking up temperature and humidity, and having early intervention by being made aware of that, 40% of secondary care visits to hospital were, they believe, averted, and 13% of GP visits. It was quite a big lump. What we've found since then is that the ability to essentially monitor CO2 and specifically VOC together tends to inform you when somebody's ill. And what's been interesting about that is that if you, obviously we're all human, so we excrete volatile organic compounds. And if all of a sudden overnight you've got a high carbon dioxide percentage in your bedroom, for example, and a high VOC, you're normally not well, because your body's working hard and excreting to actually work that. So with older people, that combined with movement and combined with visits to the loo actually allows you to pick into things like maybe UTIs and things like that before they even become noticed by the person, and which is, great. And the other thing is that essentially people who live on their own want to live on their own, and that's something we sort of have concentrated on, specialized in that, if you're own home, you're always happier, healthier. in there. And as long as you can keep the home happier and healthier, i.e. the right temperature, and you know that somebody's maybe not spending too much time in one room, or actually letting doesn't have any visitors, you know, there's certain subtle things that can be done. These are very early stage at the moment, but you know, by the time scale you're looking at 2030, I think everyone will have realized that actually makes such a huge difference to the happiness and healthiness of somebody in their own home. But we're working very much at the moment with Haldar Health Board to look at normality. So we all live different ways. So if all of a sudden somebody lives and they actually do some very, you know, they just change their habits, there might be no reason for that. And we believe there's a chance in the future that we'll be able to pick up early stage but dementia from picking up that and then being able to address it before it becomes untreatable effectively. So yeah, lots of interesting stuff going on.
That is wonderful. Thank you so much, John. I would be happy to open up the floor if anybody had